Hello, and welcome back to how to create your first RFP response. In this lesson, you're going to learn more about what you need to do before the RFP comes out in order to set yourself up for success. So in lesson one, you learn more about acronyms and key terms that you'll hear and see in the procurement process. In this lesson, we're going to pick it up a little bit and we're going to start coming up with some things that can help you craft and prepare your proposals long before they drop so that you're sitting pretty and ready to go when the RFP actually drops. So let's get started. First things first, let's talk about project sheets. So I'm going to go over here and show you an example of a project sheet. This is for a lobbying firm, and we wanted to set them up a few materials that they could use, for just general marketing, but also for their proposals. So this is what I set up for them. This is a basic project sheet. It has the project name, which is Pepin Academies, has a start date, started in 2011, project completion, it's ongoing, they have a continuing contract with them, reference information. This is super helpful. A lot of RFPs are going to ask you for references, and you'd be surprised how often that can be kind of painful because maybe the person that you worked with on the project a few years ago has all of a sudden changed companies and is no longer with you, or no longer with that firm. So that's kind of painful. So if you can get that information ahead of time, it really saves you some time. The amount of the contract, in this case, they kind of have a standard fee that they charge for everybody, but they just didn't want it listed on their project sheets. I would recommend getting all your information up front so you have it. You can always take information out. It's just a lot harder to add it back in when you don't have it. So for a lot of public work, and when I say public in this course, I'm always meaning city, county, state, municipalities. I'm not talking about federal. Federal is a little different. But in most cases, they might ask you for fees and that kind of stuff. You can always say confidential, but if you can disclose, or if your client doesn't have a problem disclosing the fees, or you don't have a problem disclosing the fees, it's just good to have it. It's a good practice to have it. In construction all the time, they always want to know how much something costs to build. So it's good to have that information handy. If you're an engineering firm, especially civil engineering or mechanical, electrical, plumbing, it's always good to have an idea of what the construction costs were as well. I've worked for a couple firms, and I've worked with a couple firms that didn't really want to track that information, didn't know why it was useful, but when the RFP comes out and the county is asking for it, you need to have it. And if you put too many can't disclose, it kind of just starts to look bad after a while. So here's an example of something we did ahead of time to prep for an RFP. Same thing, just a different project, so you can kind of see how that looks. And then once you have all of that information, then it's really easy to break it apart into multiple pieces. So in this example, we just did a little condensed version. We did this is for a software engineering company. We just did a nice screenshot of what the software or what the website looks like. And then we just did a description about it and just kept it very, short and sweet. And it's much easier to do that, to parse the information out, to make, to reduce things, than it is to add content. So when you're not on a deadline, it's a better time to try to create all that content, talk to who you need to talk to, interview who you need to talk to. One of the best things that you can do when you're trying to get project sheet information or information on any project is to talk to the project manager and go to them with your iPhone and ask them, do you mind if I take a few audio notes and record them? And because a lot of people, get scared about writing content, or when you say, I need information for a project sheet, if they're a project manager, they're like, I really don't know what you're talking about. So if you can at least probe their brain and ask them questions so tell me what the client was experiencing before you got started with this project. Can you tell me, using the phrase, can you tell me more about this? Can you tell me what techniques you use? Can you tell me, what the result was, what was the problem, and then what did you guys help fix? If you can put all of that stuff into your write-up, you can always cut it out if you don't need it or if you have a space requirement, but it's a lot harder to add. So just make sure, if you can, take really good notes or just record them and then transcribe the notes later, and that will save you a lot of pain. The next thing I'd like to talk about are resumes. So yes, you have a resume to get your job, and a lot of times with RFP responses, you're going to have to put resumes together for your team. So it's a good idea to go ahead and interview all your team members, get to know them, get to know their experience, and help them build a resume. Because a resume for going after a project as a company is a little bit different when you're going after a job, like a personal job for yourself. So in this example, this is a project manager for a software engineering company. And he has, of course, his name. We have a nice image of him. You don't have to use photos, but, graphics of any kind really help the readers. You've got to think that the committee that is going to be reading all of these RFPs probably has thousands and thousands of pages to look through. So anything that you can do to compress things or give them something visual with a nice impact is really going to make a huge difference. So we have his name, we have his role. General role is okay for just creating a master resume that you can edit later, but you really want to make sure that when you do use it for a proposal, that you make the role that the person's doing on the project specific. So he might be a project manager, but maybe in this case he's going to be quality control for the project. Just make sure that you specify what they'll be doing on this project. And then a summary of his experience and role on the project. Again, if it's just a master resume, just his general experience is fine. And you can see here he has 14 years total experience. He's going to be helping, typically he'll be helping with all phases of the project. That's their process. He'll be helping with discovery, development, QA, QC, and maintenance and support. So I just made sure that I put that in the general overview at the beginning of this resume. And then relevant project experience. For a master resume, which is what you're working on before the RFP comes out, you want to list all the experience that he's had. You don't want to just, a lot of times when you're trying to get this information, they're like, oh gosh, what have I done? And you'll have to pull from past resumes that they may give you. But anyway, just any of this work that you can do ahead of time. And the good news is that with the resumes that I created here, I'll usually come up with like a standard description of the project that they worked on and just change the role. So then that way, instead of having to write custom descriptions for each project, hopefully you have some team members that have worked on similar projects together. So you can just do one project description of what they worked on and then just change the role. So in the example that I'm showing on the screen here, there's only one project that they've worked on. And so, there's only one cross-street project. There's only one Sangari project. So in those cases, Sangari, excuse me. So in those cases, I, wrote a standard project description and then I just changed the role. So I hope that's a little tidbit that will help you a little bit. So why do we do all this work and why are we doing this? Well, I wanted to show you a little example of something that I was able to build in an RFP response because I already had all of the resumes and all their project experience that when they asked for in this RFP, they said, can you give us a table that illustrates your team's experience working together? If I didn't have resumes, this would have taken me forever. Can you imagine if you've only got, 2 weeks to do something? Well, if you're lucky, usually it's a couple days. Let's say you have 48 hours and you're trying to whip this table together and you don't have any resumes on anybody. That's why you do all this work ahead of time. And so when they come out with a question like, can you list your team's experience on a table? There, you've got it done. So that's what all of that work is for. Okay, so next let's talk about some other kinds of materials that you can develop ahead of time. Company history and overview. Hopefully your firm already has a website and you can just pull some of this stuff from there. But in case you don't, you need to start working on it. And this is basic information about your company. How many years have you guys been operating? How many years have you been doing what you've been doing? This overview has some key clients that it's a lobbying firm, so it's some key clients that they're working with. And then also like their mission, their vision, values, all of that stuff can go here. And also services, the services that you offer and that kind of thing. Really make sure that you can define those and also know how you deliver your services makes you different than your competitors, generally speaking. So this is all kind of boilerplate general marketing stuff that you can use for a variety of things. So even though you're starting to think about going after an RFP, it's good to go ahead and get this stuff ready to go so that you're completely ready and you can respond very quickly. Another thing that's really good to have ahead of time is an organizational chart. So this I took from a previous RFP and then I started to repurpose it. But basically, for most organizations, it might be more elaborate, or for any organization, it might be more elaborate. It might be a little bit more simplified. This team is very small, but I wanted to show how many different things they all cover. So I showed, they have a planning session, and in session when the legislature is in session, review goals, phase, and also a communications phase. So they oversee all of that. This is more project specific, but you kind of get the idea of like how you can incorporate graphics and make your organizational charts more colorful and inviting. Now I want to talk a little bit more about creating a project approach and some other narrative that might be useful for your next RFP. With this software engineering company, a lot of how they manage projects and those kinds of questions seem to come up a lot in their RFPs, or their proposals that they had been sending out. So this is just content that speaks to that. And after you've been with your company for a while, or even if you are the owner of your company, those common questions that people are always asking, your frequently asked questions section, basically. That's what you want to try to answer in your project approach and in your company overview and all of those materials. You want to try to answer a lot of those questions that people typically ask. And if you can answer those, that usually makes better content. And then it's always good, this is a schedule of deliverables, it's good to start having some kind of template that you can use to put your schedule on. A lot of big general contractors I've worked with, they have scheduling software that they use, and they just export a schedule specific to the project they're chasing. But depending on with this company, again, software engineering example, they have key milestones in their process that they always have. So they have the start, the kickoff meeting, database development, concept approval. So they have key phases in their project. And we didn't really know how long each of those would take, so we just kind of gave an estimate so the person reading this could tell. So sometimes in an RFP, they may not give you an idea of when the project is, when they're expecting it to be done. But it's always good to start trying to teach them your process and how long it's going to take and that kind of thing, and just to prepare yourself. So if you have this template already built, it's much easier once the RFP comes out to kind of plug in dates and change things. And again, this is just pretty much the same thing. As you can see, this is a good example of just a table of okay, here are all the things that need to get done. We don't necessarily know, when the dates are, but this is the process that we like to work through. So I hope I kept it short and sweet, and we went over quite a few things. So on your next, or before you get ready for that next RFP, make sure you try to get some of this stuff ready so that it will be really easy to respond to every question, and you won't have to go looking in weird places for information or try to find people that are already on vacation or out of the office. And if you do all this work ahead of time, it's really going to save you a lot of pain and frustration.